Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm Jordan Hill. We got the whole crew this week with Rusty Mansell and Kip Adams. Rusty, how is this Tuesday treating you?
A lot better than last week. Last week, I think I was somewhere in Statesboro staring down the eyes of I-16, which is equivalent to torture from Statesboro to Macon. So a lot better situation than I was. And enjoyed going down there and seeing prospects all over the coast, but I was not looking forward to that ride. I remember specifically Tuesday morning about this time going, man, just let me get to Macon.
Kip, how is Tuesday treating you, especially coming off of a not a great performance from our Atlanta Braves last night?
Yeah, well, it's pretty obvious that they spent about as long as we did partying and probably a little bit longer. They were pretty hungover on that game yesterday, but it's October, man, new month. Got a home game this weekend. This is when it starts to get, important in all sports. So, yeah, and strap it on. They'll, go out there and win one, or the Mets will lose one. It doesn't matter. They did what they needed to against the Mets. Good job by the Braves. Georgia did what they needed to over the weekend, and we're in it right now. This is the big stretch. So it does hit a little bit different when you get to cover a home game. So I'm sure you're glad to be, back home. That was a whirlwind trip for you beat writers. It's going up to Mizzou and then flying right back to be there for Kirby Smart and practice availability. So let's get it going, man. Let's talk some Georgia football.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had about 2 hours of sleep after that Missouri game, but you got to do what you got to do sometimes. So this episode of the podcast is going to be a mailbag. Before we get into the questions, and we've got some from our board, and also if you're watching this live, drop them in the comments because we'll get to those as well. Let's talk a little bit, just sort of parting thoughts, final thoughts on that Missouri game. And I'll start with you, Rusty, just your thoughts on that game, and then Kip, once Rusty's done, just jump in as well.
Obviously, a very surprising first half. I mean, I think I thought this was going to be a game that Georgia could get a good handle on pretty quickly. They did not. And when you're on the road at night in the SEC, you're going to let that crowd momentum pick up. And, a couple things led to another, and you got a ball game on your hands and you're down. And I thought the first half, the one thing I take away from this, I kind of look at the game X and O wise is the lack of separation by Georgia's wide receivers. I mean, they manned them up and they came at them. I mean, they came after Georgia. They blitzed, pretty much all night. And, the last team I saw do that to Georgia that won was South Carolina under Will Muschamp a couple years ago. He manned them up with J.C. Horn and those guys and those NFL DBs he had at the time and said, hey, we're going to cover your wide receivers. And, Georgia made some plays, some really good catches at times. And, but with situations like that, you start thinking long term. Georgia, they desperately need A.D. Mitchell back. They need Arian Smith to get back involved there. And I kind of mentioned on the Junkyard the other morning that if you're going to play that type of coverage against Georgia, you're going to leave safeties one-on-one with Darnell Washington. And you saw Georgia start taking shots to Darnell Washington. So, the concerning thing for me looking forward would be, can these wide receivers get some separation? Because all they did was stack the box and they came after Georgia and they rattled Georgia for a while and they couldn't convert. But I will say this on the flip side of that, the second half, when they needed to take that game over, the Georgia offensive line was moving bodies. I think it's just do you have the depth to play that type of game with Georgia? That you want to get in the phone booth with Georgia? They did for about 2.5 quarters now, but Georgia's offensive line took that game over. You look in the fourth quarter, watch just massive moving bodies, and Dejon Edwards finishing that thing off with some really, really good runs. So, a couple things you kind of look down the line, but at the end of the day, when a championship team needed to do what they needed to do, the old term imposing your will. Georgia imposed their will on Missouri that last quarter and a half and took that game over.
Yeah, and you look at the red zone for me. That's the one aspect that's kind of starting to show itself for Georgia. We've seen them in 5 games. We kind of have a good, read on some of their tendencies. And right now, you look at it on the surface, 30 out of 31 red zone trips, they've come in with points. But then you look at it a little bit closer and you see that, the touchdown percentage, only 17 of those 31 trips, they came away with a touchdown. That's the key difference in games like this. When you get into a dogfight, those points matter. And for Georgia in the red zone, they need to be able to, get the ball in the end zone. And I think right now, when you start to get down there and it's tighter passing windows, you got to be able to get, bounce that ball outside or hand the ball to your back, and for him to, to break a good run and get to the end zone. And that's the aspect of this team that last year was kind of an issue as well, but they were able to cover that up just by being so dominant on defense. And so right now you look at it, we said this before the season, this is a young defense. And so this part of the season, you're going to have some growing pains. You're going to have those times whenever, Kamari Lassiter does not stay on his guy and doesn't notice, when a guy takes a step forward. I think one of the aspects in that game defensively is they had guys that are kind of, they were at the line of scrimmage on guys and releasing off of them, and then there were coverage breakdowns where you didn't pick up that guy after he got off the release. And so I think for guys like Tyke Smith, who haven't played a lot of snaps, guys like Kamari Lassiter learning on the fly, these are those growing pains you kind of have to deal with. And then also Malachi Starks, another guy that, again, we've talked about how, great of an athlete he is. You got to remember he's still a freshman. You're going to have some coverage breakdowns, and we saw some of those defensively for Georgia. You take away the 5 plays for Missouri where they had those kind of issues, and Missouri only had 112 yards on 48 plays from scrimmage, and so that's almost 2 yards per play. The defense did its job, except for a couple mental breakdowns. So defensively, you have to actually, be excited about the future, because I think they're going to be playing really, really good football down the home stretch. And offensively, they fixed some things, some zone issues with their blocking, did a lot better in the second half. A group that's also trying to figure out who its best 5 are, and they need to kind of maybe shrink that offensive line group and stick to those 5. And then if you get a guy like Arian Smith back, like Rusty said, with separation, and then a guy like Dominic Blaylock comes in and is giving you those sure hands that he's had at Georgia, and being healthy out there, you could start to open up that passing attack a little bit more. And I think this offense will look a lot better. They're not going to be a dominant rushing attack this year. I think that much we know, but they can still be a very, very explosive offense.
Yeah, I was really impressed with what Dominic was able to do in that game. And, I think that was a big 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, something like that he caught to convert. I mean, if Georgia doesn't get that.
Contested. I mean, the guy was hanging on him.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of separation there, but strong hands. Not going to be able to run free every time, but you got to make those strong hand catches. And I agree, Jordan. That was a hell of a play.
The only other thing that I would say that has kind of stuck with me from that Missouri game is just turnovers. 2 weeks in a row that Georgia has had those turnovers that have really hurt them and has really allowed the opponent to hang around, and in Missouri's case, take the lead. And, it's such a sharp contrast to the way they started the year. First 3 games, they don't turn the ball over at all. And, of course, I asked about it after the Sanford game, and Kirby said, well, you just jinxed us. So, so I'm, don't want to take the blame on that one, but man, they have not done as well. And the thing too that I think we kind of lose sight of sometimes when you talk about turnovers, obviously you're giving the ball to the opponent, but that's one less drive you have. That's one less possession you have. That's one less chance you have to go down and score and add points. And at the end of the game, we're looking there and, 5 minutes left in the game, and Georgia's desperately needing possessions. And, credit to the players and credit to the team for, being able to finish. But they kind of, put themselves in a corner, back themselves into a corner because of those early turnovers. And just, the fact they were able to finish, I think it says a lot about what this team can do. But they can't find themselves, in my opinion, in a lot of situations like that if we're really going to talk about a 12-0 regular season being possible.
What a play by Malachi Starks to save 4 points. You're talking about a hustle play because if that goes in, I'm not sure that Georgia gets a win, to be honest with you there. And a hustle play by a true freshman to run him down. And, and tackle him on the 1 yard line. It shows a lot what type of character that kid is.
4-point difference on that play. Georgia wins by 4. It's always more than just one play, but that definitely mattered for sure. So we're going to get into some of the questions. We are going to start with one from the board. The question was from ALG 610, 2 straight games with slow starts on offense and turnovers, a blip on the radar or a more worrisome trend? I'll start with you, Kip. What are your thoughts on the last 2 games from the offense? Is this a reason to be concerned, or is it just 2 lackluster games and we think they can kind of get back to how they started the season?
On the turnover side, I think it's just a blip. I think that this is not a trend. Those things happen in spurts, but they're not normally things that for Georgia right now is something that is a sign of something that's going to continue. I think it's a blip on the radar in that aspect. The slow starts on offense, I think there's a little bit of the blueprint was out in Missouri. They tried to utilize it. They came with a continued attack. They did not stop attacking Georgia. They put guys in the box, but they also made sure to try to get guys in the backfield as well, to get guys in Stetson's face, to put guys in traffic there to where those short area targets were not there or hard to see for him. I think for Georgia, you're going to have to be able to combat that not only with an explosive run game, but also just guys making plays on the outside. You got to have guys that can kind of stretch the field a little bit and force those safeties to kind of to sit back a little bit more. They're loading it up right now and telling Stetson and this offense, you're not going to beat us deep. We're not afraid of that right now. So we're going to load it up and see what you can do. And Georgia's going to have to take advantage of that. It's an X's and O's battle out there. And I think right now it's up to Todd Monken to kind of come up with a game plan to counter that early in the game so that Stetson and this offense can get settled in a little bit.
Rusty, your thoughts on these last 2 games offensively? Is it something to be concerned about, or more of just 2 poor games and they can return to form?
I think they're still trying to figure out what they do well, and you start pieces of the puzzle. I mean, you can do all these things in practice, but until you're in the game situations, what do you do well? Who can do this? Who can do that? Here's one thing that offensively, Jordan and Kip both know this, that teams don't tackle anymore in practice. So how do you know what's a negative play? How do you know what's a positive play? You just kind of thud up, you run and, you get 4 yards and somebody kind of thuds you up, hits you, kind of locks you up, and you take off running. Well, I don't know the answer to if there's going to be even more practice and stuff, those types with hitting and tackling like that. But that's certainly, you don't really know until you get in games what's actually going on until the guy gets taken to the ground and there's full speed hitting, and you catch a ball and somebody can hit you. You catch a ball in practice, somebody's going to 2-hand touch you. So that is not indicative of Georgia. That's the way football is nowadays. NFL does it too as well, practice wise. So I think the questions are still trying to find answers as you go through the season. And one thing we've all learned, and one thing I have certainly learned, is there's a first half of the season, and when we get to that bye week, the way Georgia has been going under Kirby Smart, you're basically halfway there then, because you got, potential playoffs, SEC championship, another game. I mean, you could really get into adding 3 extra games to a Georgia schedule. And so there's a lot of football left. I like to see where Georgia is next week, going this week, obviously, and then Vandy. Who are those freshmen that kind of move themselves forward to go that second half of the season? We're going to see Marvin Jones Jr. more. We're going to see these receivers. We're going to see Dylan Bell play more. Will we see Branson Robinson play more? Because we know one thing for sure. Georgia is expected. They're going to be heavy favorites the next 2 weeks, and they should win these 2 games. But when they get to that Florida stretch, and then you go those next 4 games after that, I mean, we're going to find out what Georgia's made of real quick in that stretch. Not going to be any holding back. They're best on best versus those teams. So, I'm kind of looking forward to the answers for Georgia. Was this a warning sign, or was this they were still trying to find themselves offensively and they fixed it before they got to that stretch? Don't know yet. We're about to find out.
Yeah, we're going to learn, and it's going to be something to watch. And I kind of tend to agree with you guys. I mean, that It's a work in progress, but I'm not sure that it's a reason to panic because I think obviously the talent that this team has, it's just a matter of kind of figuring it out and seeing what works and what is works best. We'll go to one of the questions from the comments. Our guy Jordan Harris, who I think we need to put him as one of the co-hosts because he's been on here about as much as all of us have. Why don't we utilize Darnell Washington, Brock Bowers more in the red zone? Makes zero sense to me. I saw this question a bunch. I think it was on our board as well. I think it's a fair question. If I'm remembering right, they did hit Brock. I want to say he got down to about the 1, if I'm remembering correctly, Saturday night. But I want to see maybe more so than Brock, them get Darnell the ball more. He's done such a great job blocking. I've never seen somebody that tries to hurdle every single person, every single defender he comes on. He comes across somebody, he wants to jump them, and dude's 6'7".
Yeah.
And just seeing the way he plays, there was one play, I think that was in the first half, he called a ball and hit a guy, and the dude bounced off him, looked like a pinball. I've never seen, and that was not a little defender that hit him. But yeah, I think it's a fair critique, and I want to get both of y'all's opinions. Let's start with you, Rusty. Just as far as getting those tight ends more involved, I know that's easier said than done because we know these opposing defenses understand what kind of playmakers both these guys are.
Well, they're facing a lot of different coverages when you get that constricted area. So you find ways to counter that. What's Georgia doing? They're handing the ball off to Brock Bowers. Not in this game, but let's be honest, the first 3 games or 4 games, he's been the best running back in the red zone. Jet sweeps, just giving it to him and let him run behind Darnell blocking. So they're finding different ways to get the ball to there. And I think, there's 2 different types of red zones. There's that on the 20-yard line, and there's on that 5-yard line. So there's 2 different play calls there. You look at the play they scored on against Alabama in the SEC championship, it was a jump ball for Darnell Washington. So everything has to happen so quick. Darnell Washington's not a speed guy. He's a size guy. So they got the ball to him. You got to be able to get in and out of your breaks quick, separate with those windows shrinking. So there's 2 different kind of calls there. But I think when you're in the red zone, you see Brock Bowers gets a good amount of balls. They throw him some one-on-one balls. I think you just kind of take this game away and see where they are. I think I was kind of surprised that Brock Bowers the first 3 quarters didn't get more targets the other night. Obviously, with the defense they were playing, you can't see the entire field from an elevated view, so it's hard to see sometimes. Jordan, you're there in person. They got a safety over the top of Brock Bowers all the time. It's kind of hard to see that with the TV angle. But I know this for a fact. When they went one-on-one, the way they were playing Georgia, they just said, look, you can't guard Darnell one-on-one. So they got him the ball. Maybe they get him some more touches in the red zone. So I think that Todd Monken has to keep getting creative to get those 2 guys involved. But it'd be interesting when AD Mitchell comes back and you have to play this Georgia team a little bit different because you have to respect that guy on the outside and what he can do. You look at Ladd McConkey in the red zone. They just throw him the ball, basically extended handoff. They just throw him a bubble screen out there 3-on-2 and let him try to make somebody miss a tackle. They do that a lot with him. So, they're finding ways to get him the ball and be able to use his explosive legs in a constricted, smaller space.
Kip, your thoughts as far as the tight ends and trying to get them involved in the red zone?
I think it was pretty clear that the outside game was being taken away from Georgia. And at the same time, you look at that 4th down right there near the goal line. They run that end around with Kenny McIntosh and get that conversion. You saw they had Darnell and Brock blocking ahead of them. And I think it's also just the interior offensive line was having issues kind of clearing the way downfield. But on that play, I mean, like they got their man on man. And I think that was just kind of the change in this game where you had to use them both as blockers for Kenny to be able to get that conversion. And so I just think I think it was game plan based, and whether it was the right game plan or not, you can question that. But I think it was really just the looks that Missouri was giving them. They were not running the typical, or at least through 4 games, what Georgia's offense was, which was attacking the perimeter. I think this just became a different ball game for Georgia, and they had to buckle up and kind of wear Missouri's defense down. I guess that's the one aspect you can look at. The flaw in Missouri's game plan is if you're always attacking, you're gonna use up a lot of energy. And I think that's kind of what happened in the second half. They ran out of energy, luckily for Georgia. But to answer that question, I mean, they had to use them in different ways because the Missouri was taking away the ability for Stetson to clearly see them downfield. And so that's an aspect that Georgia's going to have to go back and look and say, how do we counter that? Well, you counter that by not allowing the defense to attack at will over and over again. You have to put some fear in their hearts. And you do that by having some guys that can kind of stretch the field, but also having running backs who can break off some explosive runs and having your interior offensive line do a better job putting a hat on a hat. So these are things that they're going to work on in practice to try to improve on against an Auburn team this week.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we get back, got several questions left to answer, so just hang around, but we'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. We'll get back to the questions. We will pull up one from our board. This was Rowlsdog10, who says, is there any reason we haven't seen Devin Willock or Jared Wilson get a shot at either of the guard spots? Both seem to play better than the first two when they're in there. That was his opinion, obviously. Kirby was asked about the offensive line on Monday. And was asked really not so much about those two guys who have been in the mix somewhat through these first few games, but was asked about sort of sharpening up and trimming how many offensive linemen were playing. You know, we've seen a rotation, and you could tell that Kirby didn't really think that was on the radar. I mean, he said that, look, basically that the guys that play quality football and they go against pretty good players every day in practice, I think they earn the right to get an opportunity to play. I think that we're going to continue to see the rotation we have. And I would have to imagine, too, that, they've seen some of the issues. There's been people paying attention to that interior. The guard play has been a point of contention, I know, with fans, with Xavier Truss and Tate Ratledge and what we've seen there. But from what I can gather, it seems like those are the guys, that they count on those guys, that they feel like they are their best options as far as this starting offensive line goes. And it's just a matter of what was something Kirby talked about after the game on Saturday, putting those guys in position to make plays, playing to their strengths. He talked about as a coaching staff, that's your job, is to get these guys put in position to make plays. So, Rusty, I'll let you kind of feed off of this and answer it as well. But, my feel is that the guys we've been seeing is probably going to be who we continue to see. And this coaching staff is probably just going to work to put them in position to play better and to try to hold up better than they did in that first half against Missouri.
They've been spoiled a little bit, obviously, how good he's played, Cedric Van Pran, but I think Saturday he probably would agree that wasn't his best game. He gave up a couple of pressures, didn't see a ton of movement out of him, and I think that Cedric would probably agree that he probably has played a lot better football at Georgia. The interior, those three spots didn't have a great day. Warren McClendon whiffed on one. It was a pressure. I mean, he just flat out whiffed at right tackle. The guy just went right by him. That's still a work in progress as well with the offensive line. But I think that you're starting to see some guys move it. To me, you look at from the third quarter on and what you saw, the movement and them taking that game over. That's something you can build off of. It takes a little while for that offensive line to kind of gel together. And they got some big body guys there. Listen, we're not at practice every day, but it's clear who they're going with. And I kind of think that's, I personally think you're going to see Amarius Mims play more in the rotation. They've been doing a thing where they play, getting Warren McClendon some reps at left tackle some too, to get that on tape for NFL. That's specifically what that is. Amarius Mims, to get him in to play some. So it wouldn't surprise me to see Amarius Mims get more reps at right tackle. Now, does that mean that Warren McClendon play more left, or does that mean Warren McClendon to set a series or two? They got 3 NFL tackles right now: Broderick Jones, Warren McClendon, and Marius Mims, and that's a good problem to have. You want to see what they do there, but I think the offensive line as a whole didn't play great the first half, but the second half, I mean, Georgia dominated that game. I mean, they couldn't score in the red zone, but taking it over what they needed to, and then starting to run the ball to put that game away. That's kind of what you look at. We'll see this weekend, because I'll say this, and Kip knows this as much as anybody that Kip gets a chance to watch other teams in Auburn as well. I don't care the 29.5-point spread. That Auburn team is always going to be physical up front. They're always going to be physical up front football team. They're going to always strap it on when you play Georgia, and be interested to see how this offensive line and kind of what's the mentality from Georgia this week. We're going to reestablish ourselves, and we're going to ground and pound and push a team around. We're going to try to throw this thing 70 or 80 times again and see where it goes. So I'm interested to see how Georgia attacks Auburn. My personal opinion, I think Georgia's going to come at them and try to use that big offensive line to wear them down and play their kind of football.
And that's what Georgia's doing right now. And you look at the total yards gained in this game, it's a little misleading, because it's Georgia gained 481 yards. They allowed 294. And again, turnovers played a big role in this game. But you look at that fourth quarter, Georgia had 185 yards. Missouri had 30. And this is about wearing down the weaker team. And it's exactly what Georgia did. And to answer this question, I mean, it's already kind of a small rotation, and it is about the fact that Marius Mims is probably one of the 5 best offensive line on this group, but you got guys in there at left and right tackle, and fans just want to slide one of these guys in the guard. It's not how it works. It's just because Georgia's seen it before with guys like Jamari Sawyer, with Isaiah Wynn, doesn't mean that every guy can do that. And that's why those guys do get to the NFL and as undersized guys are able to thrive, because those are guys that you could plug and play anywhere. And it's obviously that versatility is highly valued when Georgia's out there recruiting offensive linemen. But for this team right now, they've got 3 outstanding offensive tackles. And then, on the interior line, they're still trying to get these guys some snaps, some experience. I think Devin Willock's the one guy you could see still continuing to kind of be in the rotation. Other than that, I think they have their guys right now. It's about gelling, and it's just about locking in and playing like they did in the second half. And like Rusty said, I mean, like, that's the kind of thing you can build on as we continue to go through this season. I think you could see more and more of that, and there could be improved play. It could be looking back and this and saying these were the growing pains of an offensive line, that these 5 haven't played a lot of football together now, but they're getting better and better as each week moves on.
Knock out a couple of quick questions that I saw from our board and also from the chat. What's the likelihood A.D. Mitchell's back for Auburn? Going off of what Kirby said, he made the trip to Missouri. They made him, he went through pregame. They kind of watched to see what they thought there, and then felt like, didn't want to push him through there. So I think it's going to be very similar Saturday. I think they're going to probably get him to go through pregame, see what he looks like, see what they think. Because, again, it's still a long season. I don't see them trying to force an issue, especially when you have this run of it's Auburn, then it's Vanderbilt, and then you have a bye week. If they don't feel like he's ready to go, I don't think they will push him. Another quick question from Purple Brave on our message board. Is the 2023 schedule final? Do we keep UT Martin? Bringing that up just because we talked to Josh Brooks. That was a few weeks ago at this point, and he was asked point blank, is this schedule set? Because obviously losing that Oklahoma game, that was the marquee non-conference game on the 2023 schedule. The rest of it is pretty weak on the whole, but Josh Brooks said they're locked in, so I would not expect them to drop that UT Martin game. Playing UT Martin, I believe they also play UAB, Georgia Tech, and Ball State is who they added with that Oklahoma game going away. Really interesting stretch there. Going to be tough for season ticket holders because, man, those are I know a lot of folks that are going to be calling family, seeing if they want to come to Athens probably for a couple games.
Congrats to all the first-time attendees to Georgia football next year.
Especially September.
Yes. Another question from our board. I thought this was an interesting one because it's one we've kind of talked about throughout the offseason and even early in the season. Visor Dog says, who is a bigger threat to 12-0? I assume he means as far as Georgia trying to go undefeated, Mississippi State or Tennessee. I'll start with you, Kip. Between those two teams, who stands out to you most? Who do you think poses the bigger threat if Georgia's got a shot at going undefeated?
Man, it's got to be Tennessee right now. Just look at the way Hendon Hooker's playing outstanding football. And this is a team that has a lot of playmakers right now that have kind of, emerged from some unknown players that I think some of the best players in the SEC have kind of come through this group now. I mean, you look at Jalen Wright doing an outstanding job at running back, Jabari Small giving them, some good looks as well. But the wide receiver position, Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman, a pretty strong duo there. And then the transfer Brew McCoy. I mean, he's got some playmakers. Our guy Ramel Keaton over from Marietta made a couple big plays earlier this year as well. I think you look at that group, that is an offense that, could really test this defense. And whether or not that, they could test them for 4 quarters remains to be seen. I think that's kind of an aspect of both of these teams where it's just it's kind of a firecracker offense where I think in the first half, I think the secondary definitely for Georgia is going to be put to the test, but can they maintain that for 4 quarters? It's still my question with both these teams. I think they're both very explosive offenses, but just looking at that Tennessee game, I think it's kind of, you're going to learn a lot about Georgia from that game. And then they're not going to have a long time to really sit back and think about it because Mississippi State's going to be right around the corner.
Rusty, your thoughts between those two teams?
Both dangerous teams. And when I made my prediction early in the year, I kind of said watch this Mississippi State team because, you're playing Georgia, Florida, and then Tennessee comes to town. Then you go to Starkville. It's a very dangerous game coming off 2 very emotional games like that, Florida and Tennessee back-to-back weeks. And I tell you, I watched the Texas A&M Mississippi State game last night on replay, and I mean they manhandled Texas A&M. I mean they gave them fits. So I still think Tennessee is a game that scares you because they've got I think a quarterback that's really settled in this offense, and they give you a lot of pressures. And I think that's the game the Georgia fan base can have a tremendous impact to make that crowd, the signals and how fast Tennessee tries to go, with those types of things. So both of them are very dangerous games. That Mississippi State game is starting to loom really, really big. They're all going to be big after that bye week. I think we enjoy this. Nobody wants to rush the season on, but I think everybody, including the Georgia fan base, is going to enjoy having those 4 games back to back and having really, really, just good games to look forward to every week.
Yeah, I think these were 2 games even before the season we kind of circled. And before the season, I predicted that Mississippi State game would be the closest game for Georgia. Still had Georgia winning. And I think right now my pick between these two would be Tennessee. I think Hendon Hooker has done a good job. And, if he keeps it up, may be someone people talk about as a Heisman contender. I think it all kind of boils down to me with Tennessee's defense. If they're able to hold up. And, if Georgia finds itself in a situation when it's playing Tennessee, if it's in a shootout, that could be really dangerous. So I think both of those teams are going to be really formidable. And I think, too, I think to something Rusty said earlier, the fact that game's in Athens, I think it's huge. If that game is in Knoxville, I would probably pick Tennessee to win it, just based on what we've seen to this point. Obviously, a lot can change. But that's going to be a big game, and that's going to be something to watch, no doubt.
Have you ever seen defensive cramps in November? just tuck that one away because, I'll be interested to see how many cramps we have in Tuscaloosa next week too.
No doubt about it. Well, we're going to answer one more question, and I got to do my men's basketball minute. I know everybody listening loves this part of the program, but got a question from the board. L Hardy 249 said basketball wins loss prediction. And this is actually kind of timely. On Wednesday, we're going to have a chance to go watch Georgia practice. I believe they started last week. Georgia's coming off a 6-22 season. I think that Georgia, my prediction right now on a 31 game regular season schedule, it's going to be 13-18. They're not, I don't think they're quite good enough to finish in the upper echelon of this SEC. But again, I think Mike White has done a very good job of reloading this program. They have a pretty tough non-conference schedule, playing teams like Wake Forest, probably going to play UAB down in Daytona as part of a Thanksgiving tournament. So that'll be a tough game against Billy Kennedy and company. Playing Georgia Tech, playing Notre Dame, and then a very, very tough conference schedule. I think they open the conference slate with Auburn, who I think could wind up winning the SEC as a whole. So 13-18 is my prediction. I'm sure fans aren't going to be thrilled with that, but you more than double last year's win total. You have a chance to be competitive. You have a chance to kind of lay the foundation, because I think this Mike White hire was made understanding that it's not going to be a one-year thing. They're going to try to build this thing into something more consistent. I think they took a big step. I wrote about this over the weekend and ran it on Monday. The 4-star power forward Dylan James they got, I think that was a huge addition, and they're probably looking to add more to the 2023 class. So, yeah, I'm going to say 13-18. I think they're not quite going to be in the mix as far as being an NCAA tournament team in that first year, but probably a lot of positives to take from what it's going to be a really interesting first year for Mike White, no doubt.
I had a chance to interview him last week on the radio in Atlanta, 92.9 The Game, and had no idea, to be honest with you. I had no idea his family was built like that. I mean, you talking about AD at Duke, brothers AD at Tennessee, sisters and associate athletic director. It was impressive. I had no idea that his family was that deeply entrenched into collegiate sports at that level.
No doubt. And again, it'll be fun to follow. And I tell everybody listening, if you're interested in basketball, keep an eye out these next few days. I'll see what I can write out of getting to watch them practice, see what this team looks like. So on that note, we're going to get out of here. Appreciate everybody watching, everybody asking questions, everybody listening either live or listening after the fact. We really appreciate you guys. Hey, I want to shout out my guy, Paul, who was talking to me on the plane coming off once we landed after a very long night in Columbia. He was really excited and had a lot of praise for myself and Kip and Rusty as well. That's always great to hear from fans, especially going again after a long night. That was
what time did y'all take off?
We took off at 7:30. So so I stayed in Columbia, slept about 2 hours, and then drove an hour and a half to St. Louis. So I was out Saturday night, or Sunday night, I should say. About 8 o'clock, I went to bed.
Oof, dead man walking.
Oh man.
Yes, but we're going to get out of here on that. Appreciate Rusty. Appreciate Kip popping on. Appreciate everybody listening and watching. We appreciate you guys so much for allowing us to do what we do. It's so much fun, and couldn't do it without you guys. So on that note, we're going to get out of here. Appreciate it. And until next time, take care.
Go Braves.